No, Ole Miss is not going to miss Quinshon Judkins in 2024.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Rebel Nation. I am your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we dive into the very public task of replacing Quinshon Judkins and why, for whatever reason, people are just rooting that Ole Miss struggles in the run game. Why doesn't Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss get the benefit of the doubt? After all, last year, Quinshon Judkins averaged a Kiffin-era low 4.3 yards per carry. And it's easy to imagine this year an uptick in production with a heavier Ulysses Bentley IV, Henry Parrish Jr. returning from the Miami Hurricanes, and the addition of a big back thumper and Rashad Amos from the Miami Redhawks. The offense will look different, but potentially be more effective. This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers and insiders who make the show what it is. And don't forget to find that second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy, heck, even Zach Blackerby at Locked On Auburn. They offer different perspectives on college football, the SEC, and even Ole Miss, and you know how I feel about perspectives. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now, Ole Miss is not going to miss Quinshon Judkins the way that the national media and everybody in the ether out in national college football land is hoping that Ole Miss does. Quinshon Judkins is a good, tough running back. He is a throwback, honestly, of the running backs that you saw in the late 80s, early 90s, that style of back, to where he averages 4.3, 4.5. He is really good in between the tackles. Inside the first 10, 15 yards, he is super quick. He doesn't necessarily have the breakaway speed, and it limits the offense as a whole because of that, and we'll see what happens. I mean, that is what is going on with Quinshon Judkins. The Quinshon Judkins that is at Ohio State right now is not the same Quinshon Judkins that led Ole Miss in rushing as a true freshman with like 1,600 yards and in a backfield with Zach Evans. That was a good backfield. It just was. And Quinshon Judkins was able to lead the team in rushing and was explosive. He was very twitchy. He is a guy that you thought with development, he had a chance to be special. But his second year at Ole Miss, it just didn't work out for him. He ended up with nearly 300 carries, nearly 1,200 yards. He had a lot of short yardage touchdowns from the red zone area, but he wasn't the same back from his freshman year. And he definitely wasn't worth the squeeze that he was putting on Ole Miss and the Grove Collective over the course of the year. Yeah, like I said, he averaged a Lane Kiffin-era low of 4.3 yards per carry. That's unacceptable. And when you look at the running back that kind of took games over for Ole Miss over the course of 2023, it was Ulysses Bentley IV. He's the guy, he only had 95 carries, but for that, he had 540 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had the explosive touchdown against the LSU Tigers. He was the running back that kind of opened up the Georgia Tech game, kind of opened up the Arkansas game, and let it breathe a little bit. It was not Quinshon Judkins. Now, Quinshon got his yards when it came to volume running. Like I said, he had nearly 300 carries. If you want explosivity, it was Ulysses Bentley IV. But Ulysses Bentley IV has a little bit of an injury problem in his career at Ole Miss. He's been hurt every single year at Ole Miss. It's not a slam against him. It's just happened. And because of that, Bentley has put on some weight, and he came into fall camp this year at 205 pounds. Put on to take a little bit of the wear and tear. So if he can keep the explosivity and having that weight, you have a chance to have a different running back because Bentley does run really hard. Now, another running back that Ole Miss brought in because you weren't going to replace what Quinshon Judkins offered with one back. That running back does not exist in the transfer portal. But what you can do is do the money ball thing and kind of replace him in the aggregate. You've got the explosivity with Ulysses Bentley IV. And now you've got Henry Parrish Jr. from Miami, averaged over 6 yards a carry and 6 touchdowns. He's not the biggest guy, but he is the running back that keeps the trains running on time. He is a guy that's always going to do what he has to do. He is a good little back. And he's somebody that is going to spell Bentley and Amos in a very, very real way. Speaking of Rashad Amos, he is the thumper of the group. He's 235 pounds. He is a big guy. Last year, 210 carries, over 1,000 yards, and 13 touchdowns. That's pretty close to 5 yards per carry there. And he ran for, in the Cure Bowl, as you can see, in the rainstorm that it was, for over 200 yards for the Miami Redhawks. Other running backs that are worth mentioning, you do have Dominic Thomas, the transfer from the Clemson Tigers. He has not played very much. He does have like Dalton Hilliard type thighs, and he's somebody to at least pay attention to. And it's also worth talking about Logan Diggs a little bit. He is currently recovering from his ACL injury that he suffered at the new year. He is somebody that over the course of this season, we have to pay attention to where he is, because my guess is that by the time it's time for a playoff run, he's going to be rounding into shape a little bit and can help Ole Miss. But Ole Miss has to get there ahead of time. So that's what's going on with Ole Miss's running back room. And you can see that in the aggregate, if you want the Moneyball thing, you're in a situation that Ole Miss could be in a more explosive offense, have all the touchdowns, all the yards that they had a year ago without all of the distractions that were being caused. Everybody has heard the stories of what went on last year and how the breakup came to be. I'm just impressed that Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels were really quickly able to make a statement for what this football team could be in 2024. I think this team is going to look like it did in 2021 and 2020. That was the Jerry Neely, Snoop Connor, Henry Parrish backfield. I think you're not going to have anybody that really runs for over 700 yards over the course of the season, especially with the strength being Jackson Dart and the wide receiver units. But if you look at this running back unit, I think they're all going to be fairly balanced. I think their TD numbers are going to be very good, and the hot hand is going to take over in different games at different points of the year. It might be a situation against Arkansas that Rashad Amos just completely takes over in the fourth quarter. South Carolina might be, somebody else, Henry Parrish or something like that. So I don't think it should surprise anybody with what it can do. I think this offensive running game, they're not going to miss Quinshon Judkins. I think yardage-wise and what they want to do, they're going to be able to accomplish that, especially with the defenses focusing on that wide receiver unit, making running the ball a little bit easier, which will help with explosive backs like Ulysses Bentley and Henry Parrish. He's a very good receiver of the ball. And Henry Parrish talked Monday that they're splitting running backs out. So they're talking about more empty sets, not empty personnel. Empty personnel would be 5 wide receivers, no running backs. Okay. Empty sets, which means they can do it out of 11 personnel, which is 1 running back, 1 tight end, something like that, of players that are lining up. And Henry Parrish and Ulysses Bentley and even Rashad Amos, their versatility allows them to do stuff like that. And honestly, I think you will see Ole Miss run a version of what they did against LSU in that last drive, if anybody wants to go back and look at that. But you'll see Caden Prieskorn with Ulysses Bentley out there, that explosive player in Ulysses Bentley catching the ball with a tight end blocking for him, but it's essentially an empty set. That might be worth keeping an eye on as well. We'll see exactly how that goes. Anyway, coming up next on Locked On Ole Miss, the early season shuffle of the offensive line. Is that a sign of trouble, or is it a testament to Ole Miss's incredible depth? We'll talk about that in just a second. Stay tuned to find out. GameTime is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. You know, there's not a bad seat in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, but GameTime makes it to where every one of them, you can see exactly what you will see from that seat before you buy the tickets. They have that. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation, job loss protection, all of the customer service suite that you would be interested in. Take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with GameTime, and with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss football history, I might be able to help you out with tickets. Download GameTime today. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And with the numbers that I saw and everything, there's a good chance that Ole Miss might completely sell out of season tickets this year. So GameTime might be your avenue to get tickets into the stadium. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. He gets you ready with an exciting view on this season, on the gridiron, with discussion of the upcoming games and ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the portal, NIL, and the new expanded playoffs and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. With the pads coming on this week, and I think earlier in this week they did a full pads practice. We got to see video of Walter Nolan as a defensive lineman being kind of the force, which means we can start paying attention to the trench play. And we all think that the trench plays are going to be majorly important over the course of this season, especially if Ole Miss wants to really show up against the Georgia Bulldogs and kind of become the guy. So Ole Miss has had different lineups in their early part of fall camp. We've seen Gerquon Scott centering, which is at the very least interesting. We've seen Diego Pounds not be in the starting five to being in the starting five. And the point of this is Ole Miss is mixing and matching with trying to find combinations to make an effective unit in the offensive line. You have Julius Buelow that is doing well, like Diego Pounds, like I said, who's popped into the starting lineup, Gerquon Scott. And you might notice that we haven't talked about Nate Kalepo. And Nate Kalepo is currently in concussion protocol because of a car accident that he had right before fall camp. And one of the insiders on our Locked On Ole Miss Insiders program, did a nice, huge text about what exactly is going on with Nate Kalepo and what exactly happened and all that. And I don't want to get into all of that, but man, Nate Kalepo got out of that about as lucky as he could, honestly. And, good for him for participating in individual drills on Tuesday night. He is not doing any contact at this point, but he's getting closer. He's played enough football to where, other than the terminology, which you kind of pick up outside of the practice field, I think he's going to be fine. So nobody freak out about what's going on, especially with the first games of the season. Nate Kalepo, I think eventually is going to be a guy that kind of slots in. We'll see what happens with Caleb Warren, who I think is currently in that spot right now, but we'll see with all the players that came in, all the returning players. Ole Miss's offensive line is at about 10 deep at the moment. Now, is Ole Miss going to play 10 deep? No, they're not. History says that while Lane Kiffin and everybody is very keen on a 16-game schedule and doing all the depth and finding all the people to fit those roles, that's not traditionally what they do. So we'll see. I think the depth that they're doing right now is absolutely normal. I think it's also a testament of Ole Miss's schedule at the beginning of the season. Ole Miss opens with Furman, then they have Middle Tennessee State. They have a road game at Wake Forest, and then they play Georgia Southern. And should everything go the way that they're supposed to go, Ole Miss should be able to get through those as well, which means in the ramp-up process, you have a little bit longer runway than everybody else. Nate Kalepo, very lucky with what happened to him, but it looks like he is getting close to getting on the field. Diego Pounds has kind of inched his way towards a starting lineup position. Like, who knows if it's going to be Diego Pounds or Jaden Williams over at left tackle. I mean, that's a guy who has started a lot of football games. Both of them have started a lot of football games. And then you have Micah Pettis over on the right side, and nobody talks necessarily about him. And you also have Eli Acker and Jeremy James and a whole bunch of players that we need to keep an eye on the Ole Miss team. Also a backup to the backup center potentially is Reese McIntyre. I do want to say his name as well. Offensive line is probably a good sign that they're moving and they're trying to find the right combination. Now, part of this is honestly a consequence of spring, to where you had to be careful not to have a depth chart that's even developed internally during spring practice, because you didn't want people to jump into the portal because the writing was on the wall. So Lane Kiffin was real quick about not doing this to where a depth chart happened. It was very chaotic. It was when you looked at who went into where, you couldn't necessarily pick a depth chart out of the lineup. Now that he has to try and figure it out, this longer runway that he has, with Furman, with Middle Tennessee State, with Wake Forest, with Georgia Southern, that's kind of a godsend because of the transfer portal and what it has done to college football. I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just changed the way rosters are constructing. And now that kids can just hit the transfer portal and transfer out twice a year, all of that, I mean, it is going to become interesting. We'll see exactly how it goes. So, up next on Locked On Ole Miss, we're diving into your burning questions. Our insiders, they're the only ones that's allowed to participate. They're here to ask all the questions you're thinking about on everything Ole Miss. Don't go anywhere. So it is mailbag time. And by mailbag time, I mean the insiders have a chance to ask questions. And the way this works, if you're interested in being an insider, you can get in for 75% off over the course of the football season. That's about $1 a month, if we're going to be honest with it. We send out text message notifications of basically everything that's real. We ask interactive questions, all of this without having to deal with message boards, trolls, and all of that, to where you can enjoy following Ole Miss football. So check it out. The promo code is Fall Camp. Now, the first question that we have is from Ryan in Nashville. Of the early season pre-SEC play games, which game should fans most be looking forward to from a display perspective? Do you think we will gain more info from the first game of the season, seeing the team play together for the first time, or from some more capable opponents like Wake Forest or Georgia Southern? Thank you, Ryan. That is a very good question, and there's a couple of different ways that I can answer that. I do think Furman and just seeing this team on the field for the first time will be a very important piece. I don't think there's any way to get around that. I think that is a big game just to see these pieces playing football in an Ole Miss jersey. That is going to be a major test. And I don't think anybody should overstate that part more than that, though, because as cool as it is to be able to see these players playing as Ole Miss Rebels against Furman, they're still playing against Furman. This is a game where Ole Miss is a 42.5-point favorite, according to, I think, FanDuel at this moment. This is a game that Ole Miss is supposed to win fairly handily. And I do think with the slow ramp up of a camp, that has a chance to be a little bit of a slow game. I think winning the game is important, but if you win the game 31-10, I don't know if you should freak out about it. That's my point about that. And I've asked David Eckert and Michael Borky about that as well. But the games that matter are probably for different things. I think the game that least matters to fans, and this is going to be absolutely weird, is the Middle Tennessee State game. I mean, that's a game to where you can see some stuff and things like that happening, but you'll already have the Furman game of seeing these players in an Ole Miss uniform. You will have the first road game, which will be not necessarily a hostile environment, but it is good to go on the road against teams and play Wake Forest in Winston-Salem. I think that is a big game because of that aspect. And I think the best non-conference game and the best non-conference team that Ole Miss might see this year might be Georgia Southern. I think they have the potential of the 4 non-conference games to provide the biggest test. They are known as the Giant Killers. They're coached by Clay Helton. They're an air raid team. If you're looking at a team to get you ready to play Kentucky the following week, Middle Tennessee State kind of fits that bill. I know I just answered that question 3 different ways, but that's kind of where I am at the moment. Next question. This is from Tim in Hattiesburg. Which is more important for Ole Miss, Walter Nolan or Princely Amon Mielen? Tim, that is a very good question because I go back and forth just thinking about which one will be more important for the Ole Miss defense. And I think the answer to that is Walter Nolan, honestly. I think Walter Nolan is the most impressive. I think a 3 technique, which is the interior defensive lineman and a 4-man front, I think they're one of the most important positions on the entire team. And if he can draw double teams, and we've always talked about if J.J. Pequise can draw double teams, that leaves Princely Amon Mielen lining up with single coverage and single blocking over on the outside. And that's a situation where that guy's going to win. And that same goes for Jared Ivey, if we're going to be honest. If Walter Nolan plays the way that I expect him to play and the defense kind of performs the way that I expect them to perform, everything's going to start with Walter Nolan being disruptive. And it's just the way this is going to work. With Trey Amos and Isaiah Hamilton back on the back part of the defense, with the safeties being ball hogs that all have corner ability and ball skills, I think defensively you'll be in better shape because of Walter Nolan. Even Princely Amon Mielen is going to benefit from Walter Nolan. And I don't know if Walter Nolan necessarily will benefit from Princely Amon Mielen, if that makes sense. Just a thought that I have. That's an excellent question, by the way. Also, we have Keith in Vicksburg. Which DB has a chance to have the biggest impact? Lewis Moore, Yam Banks, or Key Lawrence? These are transfers. Lewis Moore is from Indiana. Yam Banks is from South Alabama, and Key Lawrence is from Oklahoma. In this situation, I think there's a player that you kind of left off your list. I think Trey Washington might have a chance to have the biggest impact out of all of them. But if you just had me to choose between those 3, I think Lewis Moore has a chance to be the dude. I think he has a very Dejon Anthony type impact in his game. And he is a player that can elevate the back end of that defense even more. Trey Washington kind of is what he is. Key Lawrence is kind of is what he is. Yam Banks, anytime you have a G5 player that's moving up, it's kind of a wait and see type thing. Lewis Moore is the player that's played Power 5 football. Granted, it was at Indiana, but he's played in those big games. And he has a chance to be the Power 5 version of Dejon Anthony. Should be really, really interesting stuff. But these questions all came from our insiders in our insiders program. Right now, we're running a special where the promo code is Fall Camp, all one word, Fall Camp. And you can have it for essentially $1 per month for the next 3 months. It's a texting type program to where we all get to participate, but you have the privacy and you don't have to deal with a message board full of trolls. You can do that. and be situated. You can ask questions. You can interact with me one-on-one. Like if you have information, you can give me scoops and pitches and all of that and stuff that I'll keep an eye on in the future. But it is a really cool deal. We put the links out to all the shows and all of that stuff as well. It's a lot of fun, honestly. It's a lot of fun. So thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most perspectives, which is why we are the number one Ole Miss podcast, and your support means the world to us. For your second listen today, go to Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. You get hyped up for an exciting season with the in-depth discussions of the upcoming games and the ever-evolving landscape of college athletics. I was on that just yesterday. From conference realignment to transfer portal to NIL updates to new college football playoffs, Spencer covers it all. You can find Locked On College Football on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And like we've mentioned a couple of times, our Insiders program, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider. The best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. Our texting program sends you notifications on everything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial experience and the future of college sports coverage. The promo code is Fall Camp, all one word, and you can get it for about $1 a month for the next 3 months. We're adding new perks as we grow. Do not miss out. The link is in the description. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, we'll send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.